Bob, what do you?
Two people pretending. I can guess what the concern is.
Yeah. Bob, it's going to be on you. You're going to have to figure out this movie.
Yes, I think you can.
I understand. I'll do my best.
It'll be up to you to lead the discussion.
I didn't quite understand the movie.
Well, it was pretty. It spoke very quickly.
Yeah. So there were a lot of story points.
Oh, we are.
Sorry.
A lot of story points that just flew by.
Right.
You know.
Tonight we watched The Importance of Being Earnest, and let's identify the 4 through lines very quickly. Let's start with the main character. Main character. So who do we think the main character is?
Well, it's a very ensemble cast. So, ensemble piece. But I think the intention is that Jack or John, whichever name he goes by. I mean, back then it seems that Jack and John were kind of synonymous. But
well, they are. Jack is a nickname for John.
Yeah. He seems to be intended to be the central character.
Okay. And with Ernest being his sort of nom de plume or whatever, his alias, the bad Jack. All right, and who is supposed to be the influence character in this? Or do we have any thoughts?
It seemed like the. I mean, honestly, it really seems to be Algernon. I mean, that relationship between those two guys really seems to be the central relationship of the story.
Right. I mean, you have one person who's more or less knows what he wants and trying to do whatever, especially trying to do what's right, but trying to do whatever's necessary to achieve it personally, but and yet here's this other person who's truly a cad. I mean, not just pretending to be a cad, but really is truly a cad that seems to have an influence on that main character for good or ill.
Mm-hmm.
And so what kind of relationship do we see? I'm not talking about what kind of familial relationship, but what kind of... Hey,
All right, guys.
I love the
so what kind of relationship do we see between Jack and Algernon? Algie.
Well, it's a fraternal relationship, but it was very unclear in the opening scene exactly what their, actual relationship is. Whether they're just friends or they were supposed to be related in some way. Or what was the?
Well, they're not supposed to be related.
Well, they're not supposed to be related.
No,
but
they're supposed to be pals, with Algernon sort of being kind of like one of these hangers-on.
So Jack was in London for some reason.
He was there. He was there for pleasure.
Okay.
In other words, he was supposedly going there to do business. That's what he told everybody back home. But he was actually there because he was after Cecil, after Gwendolyn. And he wanted to pursue her. So he was there specifically. He had his London place to be Earnest when he's in London, so that he plays the man about town while in town, and then he's the responsible adult, who has a ward back home in the country. And Algernon has that sort of same kind of thing, except the flip side. He's got his own alter ego that always does all the bad stuff, quote unquote.
Well, he gives him the excuse to
get out of town.
Get out of
whatever he wants to get out of.
Obligation.
Right. So they each have these fake characters that they've established in order to not do what they don't want to do, effectively.
And then Ernest has told Gwendolyn.
You mean Jack?
Jack. Excuse me. Has told Gwendolyn about Algernon in non-flattering terms, because she's heard of this Algernon, I think, or something.
No. Algernon's her cousin.
Oh. Oh, that's right, okay.
Yeah, no.
No,
see,
no, no, I'm
it's
sorry,
mean
I'm sorry, I'm
by-
talking about
It's a
Cecily.
fake bad
I'm talking
brother.
about
Cecily has heard about Ernest. Ernest is the other brother, is Jack's other brother. The one who doesn't exist, but who's supposed to be a terrible cad.
Okay, that's all.
So
Yeah.
the one that Jack is always rescuing, which gets him out of the
Okay,
country.
that's it.
So they each have, both Algie and Jack have this crutch that they've developed, this imaginary friend or brother that they use as an excuse to do whatever they want or not do whatever they want.
Okay, but the reason Jack is in proximity of Algernon in the opening scene is because Jack is coming to pursue Gwendolyn, and so Algernon is there because he's related to Gwendolyn.
Right, he's her cousin.
Okay, all right. See that? No.
If they're friends or associates. They run in the same circles, but Jack actually has money and Algie doesn't. So Algernon is sort of this social hanger-on, right? And since he can hang on to Jack and get something out of his, for while he's trying to get something from his family, he's like, hey, I'll use you. You can be my meal ticket tonight. You can take me out to dinner if I help you. You can, if I help you, you do. So he's kind of that is a similar kind of a person, but not in character, but in station. He doesn't have the same funds, but he has the same station. And yet Jack doesn't really have the station, but he's got the funds. According to what
He doesn't have the
appearances
relations.
are.
He doesn't
Yeah,
have the
he
proper
doesn't have the relations, at least early on in the story. His relations are unknown. Okay, so the relationship is essentially they're friends isn't quite the right term. They're sort of mutually they mutually help one another.
Right.
Okay, so they're
One has social needs, the other has financial needs. It's a symbiotic relationship.
Right. Okay, and so what is the big picture? What is the very simply?
Gary, how would you describe the plot?
Just in a real
Well, in very, very broad terms, each of those two main characters want to get married and are reliant on each other in order to, but I see what your point is. There's the confusion about the name, is the
confusion about the identity.
The identity, and that obviously causes much confusion, ensues until the very end.
True, it's just,
Protecting one identity to serve the other.
right. Yeah. Everyone's trying to get somewhere to advance their station in life through either deceiving others or through self-deception.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the women are certainly involved in a good bit of self-deception.
Sort of like
Just because you're
identity
earnest.
confusion impedes love. You've got all these different love relationships. Some of them logistical, some of them emotional, but all of the identity problems creates conflict
Right.
for all of the characters.
Mm-hmm. Even between the vicar and the Miss Prism.
Right.
Yeah.
And Miss Prism and Lady B.
Right. Quick now.
That's why I just said Lady B.
Lady.
The aunt. Okay. So before we go over to those questions, what I wanted to try, I want to do something a little bit different. And one of the things, we can look at something as a situation.
Is there anybody online?
Huh?
Okay, I was just wondering if anyone was online who could.
Not tonight.
Input.
Manipulation.
Boy, it's hard to understand that movie.
Fix.
Yeah. I'm not
attitude.
sure where that.
All right. So what I'd like to do is sort of do at least start with an understanding of the genre. So it's a comedy, and it's pretty clearly comic in most all dimensions. And so when you look at a comedy in Dramatica, and you look at the different domains, you're going to find the different kinds of comedy. So in this situation, you're going to find a situation comedy. In activity, you're going to see physical comedy. In fixed attitude, it's comedy of manners. And then in manipulation, you have comedy of errors. That's where mistaken identities happen. So if we're going to look at the through lines, where do we see the overall story, the main character, the relationship? What do we see going on there? Do any of them pop out?
Well, when I watch it, I so much see overall as a comedy of manners. So that's why I was thinking of overall story would be a manipulation.
So
Or fixed attitude.
that's
'Cause
comedy of
here's the
manners.
thing, there are times I saw it. I saw it as it felt like a comedy of manners because it's very chamber play-ish, you know. But then there, you know, there's the comedy of errors when it's like all like you know the mistaken identity. So there were different times when it felt like it was about manners, you know, like you know Downton Abbey kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And but then it was just got you know then it got very I don't know Three's Company-esque.
Yeah. Well, I guess in the looking at the largest number of characters, I see it more as manners across all of them. But in the relationship, I mean, it's really you've got to say that there's a bit of impact character in the women. You know, Cecily is impacted to one of the men, the other one's Gwendolyn's impacted to the other. So that I couldn't get beyond that, but I still see it as kind of overall comedy of manners, which I guess is fixed attitude.
In the
It's definitely in the
Yes.
one of the internal domains, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Right. So if the overall story, I'll just tentatively put that here or put it here, is in fixed attitude, which we have a comedy of manners, which is that, I mean, where you get all of the, almost practically anything that comes out of Lady B's mouth
Yes. Yes.
is something that's comedy of manners.
Humbug!
Well, just everything, you know, you would expect, you know, oh, it's better to be stupid than to know everything. You know, the comedy comes from these just really wacky ideas.
Mhm.
Now that would indicate that the comedy between Jack and Algie then would be situation comedy. What is the nature of that?
Stuck in singleness.
Yeah, well, as I was saying, they're sort of in the same situation but kind of flipped, and together, well, not together, but both at the same time are trying to, increase their station in life, which is
Status.
the status, yeah.
Right. So each of them have and are trying
Yes,
to
okay.
work on status as a area of conflict, but in their attempts to get love or to
Well, yeah,
find
and even
love.
in that opening scene in the conversation between them, it's all kind of poking at each other on status issues.
Right.
I think, yeah.
Well, because again, he's got no family, but he has money. That's Jack has no family but money, and Algie has plenty of family and no money.
And there's also the interesting thing is that Jack explains that he has a house in London, but someone's renting it. So he stays with Algie when he comes to London. So he needs him there. I mean, Jack's got a pretty good deal because he's got a country and a manor, and he's making money off the London house, but he still needs Algie because who would come see a man with no family?
Right.
Yeah, they're both very antagonistic, but yet we see that they rely on each other
Yeah,
ultimately
right,
to
But
get
they're
what
very
they
much
want.
in league.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, then that seems to be consistent there. All right. So then, if we look at the remaining two, we have physical comedy and manipulation. And where does the main character seem to sit, and where do we see and where do we see Jack, and where do we see Algie?
Well, I mean, they're both playing a role. They're both manipulative. I know, but it feels like I don't know. Just looking at Jack as a main character, he definitely seems the one who is the more of the beer. He's the one who is putting on an identity, putting on airs.
Well, Jack's the one who goes to visit, he's the one who's much more active and assertive, and he'll go to the manor house. I'll take my aunt out of the room, and if, you got Algie, right, and you have Jack, who can't even say the proposal or get down on his knee, or he's just physically he's completely inept.
And Algernon goes to proposing within 15 minutes.
Right. He's just like, boom.
Yeah.
Right. So he certainly, if there's the greatest concern about being earnest, which you have, being is playing a role is one of the things that are in there. The one who is most concerned with that is, in fact, Jack, much more than anybody else. Now, it becomes part of the overall story, but he is earnest. I mean, when he's in town, he is earnest, and that's why all of the, comedy of errors ensue. Him doing that.
Right.
So I think that works. That works somewhat nicely. So we've got we have Algie as activity. Now, I don't normally suggest doing this unless it's really, unless you've got something that's clearly a specific kind of genre where it's clearly, it's really delineated. And Jack. Let's see. Okay. So there are a couple things we know about this that we can answer. So a couple questions that have been answered already for us. So, for instance, we already know the main character, who's Jack, is that his approach, he's going to be a beer because he uses one of the internal domains as opposed to one external domain. So his approach is going to try to deal with things internally, his preference. So that one is already an implied choice. So he'll be a beer. The other thing we also know is that it's going to be a stop story because of the relationship between the overall story and the main character in terms of their physical positioning is stop is where they are in parallel and start is when they are in perpendicular relationship. So that's another one which we don't necessarily even have to address because it's already been answered by the choices we've made there. So that then brings us to the question of the main character resolve. Does Jack change his fundamental nature, or does he basically stay the course? And and how can we see that?
I don't know.
Yeah, you're good. I mean, to me, it seems to me the author's intent. With the last line, the punchline, calling out the title, seems to be the intended that he has kind of learned his lesson, that Jack has learned his lesson. Be truthful.
I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.
Right. So, it seems like lesson learned. He's the one who learned the lesson, so he's the one who presumably has changed. I think it's very lightweight, but I think that seems to be the author's intent.
Because when you look at Algie, he takes the name of Ernest and he disposes of it. He was never really trying to. He uses it as an entry into getting to talk to Cecily, but he's not. It's a very little importance to him, whereas it's of great importance. I mean, serious importance to Ernest, to Jack, who is also Ernest. Okay, so that would make him a change character, and it would mean that Algie is a steadfast character, which I think is consistent. It's a comedy again.
And
so much of it's fairly lightweight,
and it's mostly the overall story ensemble. Cast. It's an ensemble comedy, and that's mainly what it's all about. So any of the thematic, personal, emotional issues are just lightly treaded upon.
Right. Okay. So now we have our main character problem-solving style. So is Jack a linear thinker or a holistic thinker, and why? And how do we know this? And if we don't know, we can leave it and see if something else will pick it for us. We need to have examples.
I know. I have a feeling for it, but I'm trying to think through the movie to think of examples. I feel like it's linear, but I'd have to go back through because it doesn't really seem to be a direct cause and effect kind of approach to say I'm going to call myself Earnest, and everything will be fine, but it doesn't consider how.
Well, if you look at it, he happens to be identified. He is identified as Earnest early on, and then he kind of has to play with that. And then when he talks to her, he's saying, well, what if I happen to have another name, like Jack or John? Oh, no, we couldn't possibly. I mean, certainly the argument he's getting back to him is much more of a holistic, explanation. And he, it's like, okay, fine, so I will change my name to Ernest. That will get me what I want, by being christened. So a lot of his approaches get constantly whacked because they're very linear, and the women in the film don't seem to at all be approaching linearly, and it's constantly, bringing him to a halt.
And Algernon, I think he's more holistic. He looks around. He's always trying to find a way around the obvious. Whereas Jack sort of seems and Jack doesn't want to admit that he's got a double life until the cigarette case is revealed. So it's kind of like he has to reveal it. But as soon as it's revealed, boy, Algernon's mind is going in all different directions about what that could possibly indicate and what he could do with that.
So I think it appears to be linear. And of course, for himself, his solution is, I have to be Ernest, and once it actually shows his name is Ernest, that for him personally gives him completion. It's like I'd set up this goal. I have to achieve this somehow.
Right.
And when he achieves it, for him, it's that provides the catharsis that's necessary, that allows him to sort of move on personally. It also happens to work out in the big picture as well, but except for that little thing about them being first cousins, which is really strange. I kind of like brushed past that right up.
Again, 19th century British aristocracy.
I don't think it was I'm not sure it was okay back then.
Okay.
I don't think first cousins really. Maybe they did.
Yeah.
I don't have to,
It
have to
depended
look.
on how much land and money they.
Right. It's very funny. The minute she finds out how much the dowry that she has, suddenly Lady B is, oh well, yes, maybe I will stay a little bit and rethink this, reconsider this.
Well, that's what I found strange is Algernon went for Cecily very early on, presumably before he knew that she had money,
Right, right.
which
And he went
didn't
for her.
seem true to his nature, his superficial nature.
Well, it seemed to be fairly consistent though, because he's really bad with money, and he's not doesn't seem to be he doesn't
He's
have
not.
money, and he doesn't, he seems to get by mostly on style and looks, and he saw Cecily and he sees her style and looks, and that's what he fell for. Just so happens, fortunately for them, is that he also ends up comes with a lot of money.
Mhm.
But that was not his. Modus operandi. And in fact, when you look at Jack having changed into Ernest, now the fact that his approach is much more on. It's more important to be earnest than it is to have money or title or that's the thing that's important. So which is kind of a really, compared to our values, is a little different, than our the current American values. It's definitely not in line with the way that we necessarily see the world.
But on the other hand, just the fact that he has gone through life without any parents, any parentage, and then suddenly this has been identified.
Right, he has
who
all the
is.
money. He has all the
Right,
wealth
right,
and stuff.
but,
What he
I
doesn't
mean, I
have
think-
is identity.
He's also saying, I'm glad at least I know who I am now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why it's his personal
Right.
issue. Is the identity issue is personal, not the big picture. It works into the big picture. It's tied to it, but it's much more of a personal issue. So, do we see the story driven by actions or decisions, and how?
Actually,
And how? And we need to have some examples.
The one thing that stood out to me as an act turn was him proposing to Gwendolyn, which seems to be a decision moment.
Yeah.
I mean, the hard part is when you have a psychology or fixed attitude story. Sometimes it's hard to separate what you're seeing as overall story domain versus story driver. So because they,
You mean if it's a decision-driven
right,
story?
right. It's because I feel like it's decision driven because I just
Now, one of the things that you can look at decision, not only as like a decision, but it can also be deliberation. So it's not it can be a process as opposed to a point. We can frequently think of action as either an event or a process event.
right.
So it's
trying to compel get Lady Bricknell's permission. There a lot is hinging on her decisions.
Right.
But even when she decides that Algernon and Cecily can get married, then Jack steps in and says
Not unless I give permission.
right.
Or give permission to Gwendolyn.
So it seems a lot is riding on decision, but I'm still trying to think of what the acting.
Well, certainly one decision we see deliberation on is when Jack is giving Gwendolyn his address in the country, and you can see Algernon's mind blurring. He's like, you can tell he's already.
He writes it on his cuff.
Yeah, he's deciding he's going to follow up on what he's just learned.
Yeah, but does it? But what turns it? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
the question is that him taking that information doesn't change anything. him acting on it does.
Well, I guess one of the big, you mentioned Lady Bracknell, is when she finds out about Jack's lack of relations and basically cuts him off. Her decision there is like, if you don't have relations, there's no further relationship.
Is driven by the revelation of information, which
Right.
could be considered an action, but along the same lines.
Well, she's
seems
making a process all through that interview. She's kind of asking key questions to help her decide if she should give this guy more time with Gwendolyn or not. So that it feels like to me kind of.
But I also think about what I'm not exactly sure what the inciting incident is, but the resolving incident seems to be looking up the information in the book. The fact that the name is in the book feels like it resolves everything.
Right, but that's not a decision. That's an action.
But that's what I'm saying. That's why I haven't quite resolved in my own mind which one. There's a lot of deliberation. I'm just not sure if it's the deliberations that are driving the plot, or if they are just being done in response to something else.
Well, if he doesn't find out the address for the country place, then Jack's got free reign to do whatever his plan.
Right. So Algernon hearing the address.
That is an action. That's not a decision.
Right.
Algernon's not deciding to listen in. Algernon gets that. He overhears this information.
Okay.
That's an action.
Because having him take 2 steps away.
And he also is the one who finds the cigarette thing and won't give it back. I mean, he's actively trying to get information out of him.
Well, right. Finds the lighter and
Cigarette case.
Cecily. Who's Cecily now? And that's
Okay.
right. So.
Yeah, well, I'll put a little dotted line under action as we're not quite really sure.
See, your instinct was right.
Or at least how did you know? I didn't know.
All right. How about the story limit? Do we have a time lock? We run out of time, or a certain amount of time, or an option lock? Now, there certainly was set. You have to do it by the end of the season. That is just
pretty vague.
It also. The story ends long before whatever the season is. It's just sort of it's a throwing out there that if nothing else is going to wrap this up, this is what's going to do it. Realistically, it's an option lock. There are only a certain number of conditions. If he meets a certain number of conditions, then he can marry Gwendolyn. But if he doesn't, then he's once he's all of those have been addressed, like the last one was his name, because that was a condition that she had, not Aunt B, but that Gwendolyn had, that the name was absolutely important. Clearly, Cecily was not really as concerned about that, because Algie. She found out he had a new name. It's like, well, she's disappointed, but now she gets over it.
Yeah. Well, he talked her into accepting it, but she still had that precondition, just not as strong as the other one.
So, I think it definitely is an option lock. How about outcome, success or failure?
Gotta be success.
Because
everybody gets what they were after.
All right.
Love, wealth,
permission,
social acceptance,
identity.
Social acceptance. Your identity. There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And everybody learns the importance of being earnest.
Which seems good.
In a completely dishonest play. It's a
dishonest play. Yes. Yes. And judgment, good or bad?
Good for everybody.
Good.
He finally finds out who he is. Really, that's the personal through line, right?
Yes.
Is
well, the title plays on the main character and the overall story.
Right.
The main character really truly finds out that even though he had made up this name, it actually is his true identity that he's seeking. Because he's always known that he really never knew who he was. That was just a given name that was based on the stop on the train stop that the guy who found him was on his first class ticket, so that's
Yeah.
that's the name he was given.
Mhm.
So he always knew he didn't have the identity, and he wanted that. And Earnest happens to be the identity that he was looking for. Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about the concerns. We can swing over here. So we have our overall story here is in fixed attitude. Relationship is over here in situation. Influence character. This is where Algie is, and this is where Jack is. And what we want to do is we want to identify which of these four is going to be the concern, the area of focus. The one in the overall story, it'll be the goal. In the so over here, one of these is going to be the goal. But whatever quadrant you pick is going to be the same in all four domains. So it'll either be past understanding, memories, and developing a plan, or how things are changing, doing impulsive responses and playing a role, or present, gathering information, contemplations, conceiving an idea, or future, obtaining innermost desires and changing one's nature. Anybody have an idea of what they'd like to vote for?
This is where you move to Jim.
Jim, you must speak at some point tonight.
Sure. It's being, doing, progress, and prevention.
So this one.
Yes.
How things are changing, doing for Algae, impulsive responses, and the overall story, and playing a role.
That feels pretty comfortable.
Playing a role, and
I mean, that's the importance of being earnest.
But it really, but it happens to be also the quadrant where accurate and non-accurate exist, and that really jumps out. I'm not sure about everything in between, but I guess worry is a pretty good one. Pretty good. Worry versus confidence. I think you see that being played out in
Well, value and worth, you certainly do. I mean,
definitely,
you've got, the value, how much property do you have, sort of the worth of a family. Are you worthy? How much value you bring to it? So you certainly see those elements in the main character: knowledge, ability, thought, desire.
Ability versus desire, I think, is a good one. You see a lot of knowledge and thought, I think, being played out. I guess in the two women, but I'm thinking about Cecily with her diary, and like the fact that she created this engagement on a particular date.
Oh yeah. Right.
And so I'm trying to figure out where to attribute that. I still feel like we're in the accurate, non-accurate area.
It could be, if they were mirroring the relationship, it could be fact fantasies.
Okay. Yeah.
It could be. It seems more of a thematic element rather than a character interaction element.
Right. And
that's the difference that the scales. The largest, which of the domains or the classes, they tend to be more genre-like. The next layer down, we call those the structural types, where you find the concern. Those are more plot. And then you look at the level down, these are more thematic in nature. And at the bottom level, the smaller ones are much more the character interaction elements. So it's not that they're exclusively character, plot, theme, or genre. It's just that they tend to be stronger illustrations of those when taken as a whole. When you're looking at the whole thing compared to the dynamics, all of this is theme, and then you have plot and character dynamics, and all of it together is genre. But so however you frame it, you're going to always find character, plot, theme, and genre. It's just how you're slicing and dicing. Okay, well, let's look at it on the software then. I will bring the screen up.
So, something responds.
Oh, the shoes.
Oh, thank you. I see. I see.
Yeah,
You see it every
USB.
night.
Yeah.
You look like the Flash. Flash.
And he moves like the Flash. Have you seen him? Oh my god.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Running through walls.
Well,
Isn't that illegal, flashing?
Was that?
Isn't flashing illegal?
Oh,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
only in certain parts of town.
Certain parts of the country?
The Flash
Certain parts
is
of
the
town.
Flash.
No, town.
Yeah, oh, well, the Flash, yeah, he's fast enough. He can get.
And so we would know.
Okay.
It's such a brief thrill when you do that.
You know, you know, such is life.
Am I having a seizure?
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
What's going on here?
Or you're just watching some Japanese anime, yeah, cartoon. Yeah.
What a messy desktop. All right. So let me make our choices. We said he's a change character.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know we didn't.
And
The writers group, I think that's the-
the overall story domain was attitude. Our main character was manipulation. As you see, stop and be are automatically chosen. That's why I underline those, just because of the relationship.
We left those as dotted lines, so we can let other things.
Success. And this is. Alright. Let's
Impulsive responses is
just save this.
Before you post it, you may want to check the spelling
It is EARNEST.
on the DVD. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually checked it when I was first. I've checked it several times.
Okay.
It was like, I'm not really sure what that one's supposed to be.
It is the AI, yeah.
Yeah. No, I.
It's a
I
double
did.
entendre.
Yes. Gee, what a surprise!
Yeah.
A double entendre in this movie. All right. So, and then we said we thought the main character was going to be playing a role. We go down there. We then clean this up. So we see 4 possible themes or issues for the main character, and then we have 16 possible elements or 4 quads that'll have the problem quad. Now you were saying this quad you felt was the more likely.
Well, I'm focusing on accurate and non-accurate. You know, because honestly, I don't. I mean, there's a little bit. You see a little bit of expectation determination.
See a bit of that.
True.
This one is not definitely theory, hunch, ending. No, that's not.
Yeah.
Proven, unproven, no, because it's really not about trying to prove it per se.
Yeah.
Trust. And trust is part of it. Seems to be part of it. Let's look over the overall story. See what we've got. See if there's. So accurate, inaccurate, process and results is over here. So confidence and worry are the. And then we have expectation and determination, ending.
Yeah. When you look at the overall story, you're looking at, okay, I mean, you are looking at attitudes. You're looking at Lady Bricknell's attitudes and how she, dominates over, every discussion. You're seeing the women, definitely, the Gwendolyn is fixated on how, she could not marry him if his name wasn't Ernest, right? And so there's a whole, I think this is where process and result come in, because then there seems to be a whole process of getting to the point where he will satisfy her fixed attitude of needing to marry a man named Ernest. So there would be kind of a focus on the process there to get to a particular result, and certainly Algernon, is hitting on Cecily in a particular way to sort of convince her, and she's playing right along because she's she has built up this whole romanticized scenario, and he's fitting himself right into that. And so you see there's a process there, a process of maneuvering through sort of these women's attitudes.
I certainly can see worry as the overall sort of issue.
Yeah, worry and worth. I mean, the thing is that if you look at Lady B, she seems to be all about worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, thematically, all about worth versus value. I mean, it just, that seems to be very, very compelling across the whole story. Worry is part of it, but she certainly doesn't seem to be terribly worried about it.
Mm-hmm.
But she is absolutely concerned about the value and worth of name and family and origin and what you think and ideology or your attitudes. It seems to me the process that you're seeing is much more of an open-endedness. That something needs to be brought. You've got something that's open-ended that's not that isn't brought to a close. Mm-hmm. That if you can bring it to a close that sort of resolves it. Mm-hmm. To me, it almost looks like the symptom is determination.
Oh, the symptom
because
is?
people have determined things about
Yeah, they've
each other.
determined, oh, you're Earnest. And because of that, suddenly there are all these expectations that someone with the name Earnest will be like this, and like that, and like that. And it's like, okay, well, perhaps. I mean, that's so if you could change what that determination is, then, or change the expectations from that determination. Well, maybe another name will be better. Can I change your expectations of that, or of me, or whatever? I mean, possibly. Let me just see what the effect of that is. We go in here. You end up with the main character. It's a symptom.
Okay. Well, no, I can see on ending it definitely is a problem because he's had this ongoing, identity issue. I mean, on a personal, basis,
Oh, look at this in the relationship. The issue is fantasy.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's the imaginary other brother or other person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's that fantasy character that can get you out of any problem, which isn't really working. Not okay. What do we have with punch?
Punch. The main character.
So it's a understanding based on insufficient circumstantial evidence. Oh, well, I can see that for him because
Well, here. here's the thing. I mean, the name Ernest. How did he start calling himself Ernest anyway? You know,
Yeah.
he just had a
Kind of
hunch
pulled it
that
out of the
he,
air.
you know, but he liked the name because it's, you know, it's honest. It's honesty, you know. And so he had this hunch that that should be sort of his mark, you know, his identity. And so, but he's still lacking that identity. He needs to put the pieces together. All he knows is that there's, you know, he arrived in a handbag and he's kept that handbag.
It's interesting. It looks to me, if you look at the unique ability of the main character, which is the quality that makes them uniquely able to have the overall, to aid in the effort in the overall story, have it in success. And my guess, and I don't have to look at all the others, my guess it's ability. He's the one, remember at the end, he's the one who can allow Cecilia to marry Ernest. He's got control of all of that. And he has basically all of that, all these different relationships tie into him saying yes. For everybody else, not necessarily for himself, but in the big picture. His desire doesn't seem to be enough. If we look at Alfie, his unique ability is either skill or experience. Algae. Sorry, not Alfie. Algae, yeah.
Algae. Scum on the water?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
that's right. Seems like skill.
Yeah.
Skill more than experience for him.
Right. And his critical flaw seems. Let's see about that. How about the catalyst in the overall story? What moves things forward? I mean, what creates more conflict? Confidence or worry? Those are both, I think, really good choices.
I mean, it's certainly Algae's confidence that he can handle Jack's life in the country.
But also Mrs. B, Lady B, you know, she's very confident in that.
And that always pushes things forward.
Or maybe it's her worry is the thing that does it. Let's see. I would say confidence might be more of it. So you've got the inhibitor would be security. That would slow things down. Threat seems to be more the thing that would slow it down.
Yeah.
You know, that he can't move any forward toward getting married because the threat he would pursue, the being of unknown origin and
well, and yeah, it's like if Lady Bracknell shuns him, which he's already said he can't have Gwendolyn, if he shuns him, he's really without relations. So yeah, the threat of losing Gwendolyn and the social connections that could have come with Gwendolyn would be the inhibitor to his plan.
well, let's just look at the two possible choices. So if we say it's ability, end up with confidence as the catalyst, threat as the inhibitor, skill and desire. Okay, that works nicely. Critical flaw, experience, and the relationship, the catalyst of security, and inhibitor of worry.
I think this is a holistic problem solving style.
All right, so let's choose the other, since that's more in line with what we thought it was linear. So that we have desire, critical flaw, skill, catalyst of worry. This one seems backwards. This does not seem right. The other one seems much better. Ability, experience.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, let's do one other thing. Let's look at the benchmark. So the overall story benchmark, we're looking at impulsive responses. Okay, what would a concern of impulsive responses be? You've got, well, I mean, if you look at,
it's everybody's impulses that you know that everyone else has to kind of you know contend with.
Yeah, Cecily is a perfect example of that. Well, on this day, we got engaged, and then we got unengaged, and then it's just like, oh my God, everybody's just sort of very impulsive.
But no, benchmark for the main character, the past.
Yeah. Main character.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry.
that would not be-
No. I'm sorry. The wrong.
Main character?
No.
Well,
Okay.
if it's the past that's developing a plan.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, that's the wrong domain. That's
I was
relationship.
looking in the wrong place. Okay.
It's in the relationship with past and future. Future does not seem.
Yeah. Honestly, I think obtaining future, changing one's nature, innermost desires. I think ultimately that's kind of
Love. That's the love thing.
yeah. That's the thing where it's like when our heart's desires are coming to what are when our heart's desires are getting closer to fulfillment, then that gets us closer to the resolution of the goal, which is to get for everybody to sort of accept each other's new relationships, right? For Gwendolyn to say yes to Jack, and for Annie B to say yes to everybody, and for Jack to say yes to Algie and Cecily. But yeah, really seems matters of the heart is the thing that increases in intensity as we get closer to a resolution.
Right.
That gives us a decision driver.
Which, again, I think we were so tentative on both the problem-solving style and the driver. I'm not at all. Either way we get it, it's probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
The driver, I was thinking about the locket issue. The locket is essentially a trigger, but what happens, he's posed with a question, and depending on how he answered that question is really the direction of the story, with one direction or a completely different direction. That's the nature of what a driver does, is it would change the tide.
Sort of forces.
Well, it forces it into a new direction. That's what a driver does. It changes you out of sort of one domain into another.
Sort of
Not
moves you
domain,
from
one area.
that point of no return to point of no return.
And ultimately, the thing is at the end, we don't really see the decision, but you know what the decision would be that needs to be there, is that she decides that he can get married, which they don't show you because there's that whole issue about them being related now.
Put myself into a corner there.
But her daughter does make the decision that it's okay with her now because he's in Earnest. So it's implied, but they don't go explicit there. I'm trying to think of what the opening conflict is. Okay, once the two of them, he's in town at Algie's house, and what is it that they decide either to do or?
Well, was it driven by Jack's decision to pursue Gwendolyn?
He announces it to Al too.
Unfortunately, I don't remember exactly
I don't either,
how the
that's all.
opening scene played out.
Yeah, he says early on that he came from the country to propose to Algernon's cousin Gwendolyn.
Okay, well,
He's a reason for being there.
so he's made a decision, and that pretty much is why the story exists. Okay, and that's consistent. So then the last two are whether or not it's a holistic or, and his unique ability, if it's desire, he's a linear thinker, but
Well, I mean, it's clear that Jack has a lot of problems asking her to marry him and other things. He's always sort of getting held up, but his desire powers him through. In other words, his shyness, his realization that he doesn't have relations, but he still loves this girl so much, so he manages to desire her enough to do so.
I mean, I can see, in that context, I can see Kurt Claw's skill. I mean, in terms of, that scene when he's proposing, he's clearly, well, I mean, she makes comments on it. Most boys practice it.
Yeah, it's practice.
My brother has lots of skills and has practiced it many times.
Mm-hmm.
You don't seem to have any skill at this.
Yeah.
You still haven't asked the question.
Right.
So yeah, I could see that actually.
Well, except that the alternative choice there is experience, football experience. So
yeah,
you could argue it either way.
That's actually more appropriate in terms of what that's saying, because rather than how he's doing it, it's how familiar he is. Although he really doesn't have, he's unskilled and he's inexperienced. Mm-hmm. Catalyst in relationship, threat, and inhibitor, confidence. Well, okay, you can easily see the threat issue when Algae is threatening to, expose him. Yeah. that and just completely makes the two of them get at odds.
And Algae is a huge threat to his role as a careful and good guardian. And
yes.
Algae doesn't give a rip about that. He wants the girl.
And then the overall story, catalyst of worry. I kind of like that. You certainly see it with probably the biggest worry wart in it is Jack. I mean, he is hugely, and then also you get that with the with Cecily, that just seems that Jack's not there. Because certainly Algae doesn't seem to have a whole lot of worry. He's pretty devil may care.
But I mean, I still kind of look at it that Lady Bracknell, even though she hides it well, is worried about making bad choices in the social situation.
Right, but you see that the inhibitor is security, which I do see that as being good, because that's sort of that's when he finds out, oh, well, she's got lots of money. It's suddenly oh, well, let's stick around here, because my nephew, who has all these, who I worry about, now it's oh, this would be nice and secure, and that would set him by, and so I'm willing to overlook a lot of things for 190,000 pounds. Okay, what do we have in terms of signposts? All right, so if we look at the signposts, we've got the overall story. It starts off with impulsive responses. Then it goes to innermost desires, contemplation, and memories. Good. I was hoping memories would be the last one. That's basically where you have, certainly the very last part of the last act is all about
when Lady Bracknell recognizes Mrs. Prism and all that, and Mrs. Prism explains what happened.
And that certainly fits nicely in that.
It brings out the handbag, which is a symbol of memories.
And then you've got the changing one's nature for the main character is the first act, going into playing a role. That's when he's playing Earnest. It goes from I want to get married. I'm a single man, and I come to town, and I want to change my life. I want to become a married man, and then finds out that I've now got to play this role of Earnest that I said I am when I'm really not Earnest. And then the third act is, so now how do I make this work? That's when they're sort of pushing against the two women, and sort of reconceiving how they can, love them, and how he can, reconceive
Get
himself.
past their conditions and still make this work.
And ultimately, developing a plan is, okay, I can solve this if I can figure out where where I came from. That whole last scene with, again, who are you? Where did you find this? What station? Where can I find my name? And ultimately finding it, that sort of brings it up to the climax and resolves it.
And the plan that's presumably developed by the last scene is, we're going to all get married now. That's the kind of next
Right.
the off-screen plan that they were seeing. Yep.
Wedding planning.
Yeah. Okay. This seems to be pretty good. I think it's a pretty as much as it. Yeah.
Question?
Yes.
Because I didn't see the movie, so I have no idea. But was the last line of the film? What was
The
his last
importance
line
of
of the film?
so.
Now realize
Now realize the importance of being earnest.
So is that, to me, that I don't know the rest of that, sounds more like a determination than ending? Are you for sure that those are the elements that you like?
That it's a determination solution. You mean?
Solution, yeah.
No, it's an ending because
It is an ending. That's more
he's
than
the guy has basically, his backstory is that he was found in a bag in Victoria Station from a check room. Was handed to a man instead of his luggage. It was one that looked just like it, and instead of its luggage, it had a handbag that had this baby in it. And so this guy raised him, gave him the name Worthington, which is the station. Was it
Worthing.
Worthing? Sorry, Worthing. So you have Earnest and Worth. That's in there. So Worthing,
And an inheritance.
which is a name that was on the ticket, the first class ticket of the station that they were getting out, and he ended up inheriting a lot of money and such from this guy, but he has no family, and so he's got a lot of
Baggy goes away.
yes, it's a real issue, and because it's all open ended, it's a real serious problem for him because he can't resolve it. And the thing that he's trying to do is he's trying to sort of put all those pieces together, and once it is, it's done. So it really is that is over. And the weird thing about it is that coincidentally he falls in love with the cousin of this guy whose house he stays with when he goes to London. Algie, who's this guy who has all the station and none of the money. Which is really funny when Lady B is talking about the value of money versus property, because essentially he's money and her nephew is property. Basically he has a stake, he has a title or sex or whatever in property, but he doesn't have any money. So the two of them are sort of flip side of each other. And coincidentally, these two, the main and influence character, who are buddies, sort of by circumstance, one that the Algie sort of feeding off of Jack, and Jack is sort of feeding him because he's using his place to stay when he goes to sort of carouse in London. They're actually brothers. That Jack is Algie's older brother. That the woman who was responsible for the nurse was working on a manuscript, put the manuscript in the pram and put the baby in her bag, and that's how the mix-up happened 38 years before. And so, the very end of the story, that all is worked out. So, and his name was the same as his father's, which was Earnest. And so the importance of being Earnest was that he has this alter ego that he's created, this fantasy character that he always says that he has this brother named Ernest Worthing that does whenever he needs to get out of something, he's always going to rescue his sort of evil brother, who's just this terrible person that he's his brother, his only family, so he has to do that. And when he's introduced to Gwendolyn, it's as Ernest Worthing, and Gwendolyn she couldn't imagine marrying anybody except for someone with the name Ernest. Okay, and which of course is a pretty silly conceit, but
There are a lot of silly conceits.
yes,
Like that baby was.
yeah.
What? It wasn't an uproar caused by the disappearance of the baby.
Well, but remember, the baby was this was going out into the basically down by the beach. So it was really not at all in London. So by the time any of that happened, who knows what had happened. Anyway, yes, it is all terribly silly conceit. But that's how it really is ending. It does once that loop is closed, his past is resolved. Okay. And then of course, since he's going to be marrying, he's engaged to Algy's cousin, that means he's actually now engaged to his own first cousin, which they don't address. They just sort of, okay, we're out of here.
Yeah.
It's like the Toto thing at the end of Wizard of Oz, Toto was going to be destroyed, but now that we got back safe, and what's going to happen to Toto?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't talk about that.
About that.
Okay.
It's interesting. Oscar Wilde told somebody back in the day that the play's theme was that we should treat all trivial things in life very seriously, and all serious things of life with a sincere and studied triviality.
So that is in fact the point of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's supposed to be that kind of really like silly.
Very light.
But it does. I agree. I've read it as well, and it does play much better than reading it. Because then you just go that fast. You're not
The banter.
dwelling on all of the tons of double entendres and sort of silly comments that are made.
I never realized till just now that put it together that Jack's attempt to finally create a family ends up having him identify what his
Real family.
real family is.
Yeah. So I think it does. It is interesting that it does seem to work out nicely. There is symmetry to it. There is structure to it, which is one of the reasons why I think it actually holds up relatively well. The
Great lines.
yes, there's some really funny bits. And again, I love the character. The aunt is.
Yeah, it's great.
What a trip. Pretty amazing. Any other questions before we?
Well, I'm being new to this. Does the unrealism of a story, does that have any influence on how well it works in your system?
Nope, because it's really about the way to think of it is what Dramatica deals with is the underlying message, which is all abstract. It's sort of the real meaning of it. Things like puns and the way in which you illustrate it, whether it's fantastical or mundane, that's just the way a writer communicates those abstract underlying concepts. This story form, pretty, I would say objectified. This view of it is very objectified, but it's a very subjective message, meaning it's all about meaning. There's no substance to it. And the reason when you illustrate it, or you story encode it, which just means illustrated basically, that turns it into the specifics that are what every writer brings to it.
Analyzable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, it's the thing that you, as a writer, you hone that part of your craft and art. This part isn't art. This is psychology. This is the part that communicates to everybody. Why, all audience members are experts in story. They all use the same kind of problem-solving style. That's this problem-solving process. These are the components of that. And a narrative, a story, what we call a grand argument story, which is this complete version of it. It communicates that as the carrier wave, and all the storytelling is what we're looking at, but really what's being communicated is that underlying meaning, that message.
And like an author or writer who doesn't judge his or her characters, or an actor will do that too, then this does not judge them, it just evaluates them.
It just exposes them. It doesn't evaluate them.
It doesn't even evaluate.
No, I mean,
To see
you
what
as
they
an
are.
author might go, oh, dude, this is not the story I want to tell. I mean, I don't hold those values. Which that's why you would choose one story form over another. People will tend to explore stories as authors. They'll tend to explore stories that are close to the issues that they're dealing with personally, because they don't have an objective view of those parts of themselves. And by going through the creative process and exploring and exposing it, it can be cathartic and it can help identify for the author, or through exploration, what it is that's going on inside them. Doesn't mean it's necessarily therapeutic, but it can be. The idea, though, is that the drive, the motivation for writing or creating comes from that inequity. Something's out of balance. And at the heart of every single story form, it's based on an imbalance. Something's out of whack. And the grand argument story is about how the process of trying to resolve that, trying to bring that back into balance, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully. But that's the meaning that you're conveying through the choices that you make, or through the aspects of the story that are implied by the rest of it that's there to support it.
I was thinking about the recent discussed Dramatica thing where Bob Raskoff posted all these story forms that are alike, same story form but very different genres in terms of was it Aaron Brockovich and Kung Fu Panda?
Yeah.
I think same story form, but there's obviously a different style of storytelling laid over those.
Really? I thought they were almost identical.
So that's just an example. The abstract message of this story is still very strong about being kind of an outcast person who still finds a way to make it.
Right. So the expression is very much the complete domain of the author. That's wholly in the author's domain. The story form is what story form they choose for the story is the author's, but that's going to be shared by everybody. And sometimes it will be in line with a particular culture's sort of narrative, and other times it will be specifically chosen because it's out of alignment with that. You see Woody Allen frequently doing stories that are mostly the same, except in a couple key areas where they will be the opposite of what the norm is, just to make a point. Where the bad guy gets away with murder and is okay with it, versus the good guy who loses everything and feels bad. That's crimes and misdemeanors. It has those two stories juxtaposed within the same thing. Both of those are not the stories that were supposed to be true in the American dream. Good guys win, bad guys lose. And
Or like in this, that's what makes fiction. That's good fiction is where the good person wins in the end. I mean, Cecily or Gwendolyn says that in importance.
Right. That was pretty funny. Right. Right. And that's how she's making that judgment. Again, it's a fixed attitudes domain. So there's all these judgments, all these proclamations about the world. This has to be seen this particular way. that's why the whole of that entire through line is over there in Fixed Attitude, because that's a comedy of manners. It's,
Right.
what's proper and what's improper based on ideology. And then the clash of those is where the comedy comes in. Anything else? Cool. All right. Well, I think next month we have, what is it? Full Hand Luke? Oh, no. Sweet Smell of Success. I think that's a longer movie, isn't it?
Well, it says, no, it says 96 minutes.
Oh, it's nice and short.
No.
It's Burt Lancaster and
Sweet Smell of Success.
Tony Curtis.
Tony Curtis.
It's a great movie.
I haven't seen it, but it had lots of great stuff, so I said.
Sandy McHenry.
Yeah, so
What's that, who?
Sandy McHenry.
I look forward to seeing that.
Thomas Keller.